2025 has gotten off to a great start. All thanks to you, my loyal listeners. We appreciate your feedback and support. You can subscribe to our Should Have Listened to My Mother podcast channel on YouTube, and you can find Should Have Listened to My Mother on all social media platforms. It's very easy to find us, and tell a friend. And thanks to all the mothers and female role models of the world, because we wouldn't be having these sometimes complicated yet endearing conversations without you. March is Women's History Month, and today we're going to have the privilege of getting to know 3 generations of women that have left a mark in the Coral Gables area of Florida, beginning in the early 20th century. Joining me today is a talented June Thomson Morris, a former multi-Emmy award-winning news anchor and journalist. June is a passionate advocate for education and community history. She also has served in leadership roles for the Coral Gables Economic Development Board and the Coral Gables Museum, and was recently awarded the museum's Civic Arts Award for her philanthropic work. June's mother, Dorothy, is also joining us today. Dorothy was the first and only female mayor of Coral Gables to date, and we'll hear about the woman who created this incredible legacy of inspiring women. At the age of 19, June's grandmother, Mae Barnes, boarded a train from Indiana to Miami in 1920 all by herself. In celebration of the 100th anniversary of Coral Gables, bringing Miami's past to life, June has written the play Greetings from Paradise, inspired by the true story of her grandparents. June and Dorothy, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you. I think a lot of examples of why it's good to listen to your mother, because we have strong women out there, as you say, and there's a lot of strong women in my family.
Not everybody gets to share their story or to celebrate it or acknowledge it. So this is really wonderful how you have come full circle and are presenting this story. It's quite a wonderful impact, not only on the Miami area, but it's inspirational, especially for the young women out there, young girls and women out there.
No, it's so interesting because Miami is such a multi-ethnic area, and we have, of course, the wonderful Latin influence down here, tapestry of people from all over the place. It's rare to find somebody like us, who have been around for a while, have been here since the beginning of Miami. So when I tell people that when Miami was first incorporated in 1896, I think it was, and then Coral Gables in 1925, it was really a black and white city. It was 50% black and 50% white. And there was no Latino influence. So it's hard for people to even imagine such a thing. But we have pioneers, both black and white, who need to be commemorated.
Yes.
History. It's an important history.
Yeah, and I thank you again for bringing it to my attention. It should have listened to my mother. Dorothy, what inspired you to run for mayor? I mean, we're just going to jump right in there.
Well, it took many years of various small steps to arrive where I did arrive, and I'm very, very pleased and very. I feel very proud to be the first and only female mayor of the city of Coral Gables, founded in 1925, and celebrating its centennial in next month in April. So I feel that I've fulfilled my part in the history here, and I'm handing the baton, if you will, over to my daughter to continue it on.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Did you learn, or were you inspired by the actions that your mother took when you were growing up?
Oh, yes, aren't we all? We are our mothers in one way or another.
We want to correct one part of that,
Yes.
because Mae Thompson is my father's mother. So she did come down from Indiana in 1924 to meet up with a man she had met one time at a party back in Indianapolis. She was 19, he was 27. She convinced her mother, it was scandalous in those days for a young woman to go down on the Florida's East Coast Railroad down to a brand new place, Miami. No one had really even heard of Miami yet. But she convinced her mother that it was a marriage proposal and that if he didn't marry her, she would head right back north again. And luckily for me and for my mother, he married her because then they had my father, John Thomson. And but I think it's fabulous that and interesting that she came down by train by herself in 1924 and ended up in doing all kinds of wonderful things in Miami. My mother came down by car at age 20 from upstate New
driving
York,
myself, yes.
driving herself.
All right.
And then ends up becoming the mayor of Coral Gables. And then when I came of age, after I finished school, I was at Northwestern University. I headed out west by airplane on my journey. But I'm the one who came back after all these years because I just wanted to be close to my family again. And I love Coral Gables. I love South Florida.
You know, June, there's a similarity. We thought about that in a way, but as you have said, your grandmother came down here and within a day married your grandfather,
That's
right?
right.
I came down from New York State in the month of July and got married in November of the same year. And I mean,
Wow.
7 years. My husband just passed away.
Both happy marriages. That's the way it was back then.
We do.
Yeah.
Right?
Similarity.
And yet the one piece of advice where it fits your topic of I should have listened to my mother and my father were both telling me not to marry my first husband. And I wish I had listened to them. Because they flew out. I was in Phoenix at that time, and they flew out and they told me all the reasons why I should not marry him.
And yet you were married for 25 years.
Yes, I was with him for 25 years. I kept trying to make it work, but in the back of my head, everything that they had said was true. And
now, were you not listening out of resentment or being stubborn because you didn't want, stamping your feet, or you just didn't think they were right? Or a little bit of both?
I was lonely. I was in my broadcasting career. Back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have smartphones, and I was working very hard. And this was during the time in broadcasting in the 80s where women were just breaking barriers. So it was really a male field. I was getting a lot of harassment, let's say, some of it's sexual harassment in the newsroom, and there were no protections in that time. And here was this man who seemed to love me very much. And
also in broadcasting too.
And he was also in broadcasting. So I just thought, okay, I want to get married because I'm lonely.
Right.
And
but you learned from that experience, right? You learned from that experience.
I sure did.
Right. And in life, we have to go through those, whether they're stumbling blocks or we have to make the best of that experience. So now it helped you become who you are today.
But you did listen to me until that period.
Until that period of life.
Yeah. You made some great milestones of your own at that time. And I'd like to recount a couple of them too.
Please do. Are you ready, June?
I'm ready. Go ahead, Mom. Go ahead, Mayor.
Going back to your junior high school years when you wanted to be a part of the band, which I said everyone has to have some music in their soul. And you want to be a part of the band. And the band director was asking each student, to pick an instrument. And I hit her with her. I told her, go for the French horn. She said, what's that? And I told her what the French horn was about. And I said, probably you won't have any competition to get that part.
But it's kind of large.
And before her, 2 years before her, had done the same thing and asked Mommy, what should I ask instrument to play? Because that's what the band director was saying, make your preferences known. And I said, play the oboe. And nobody wanted to play the oboe. So she was an oboe player all her life.
But do you see what the real emphasis is on being first chair? I wanted to be, the truth is I said I wanted to play either flute or clarinet because all the popular girls were sitting in the back. The band was with this semicircle and up on the risers, and all the girls are up there giggling, and I was imagining, sharing juicy gossip. And yet my mother insisted that I let out these guttural French horn sounds because I could be first chair. First and only chair. And then I had a red ring around my mouth.
Oh my
the next couple of classes. So thank you, Mother.
And then another occasion when you were in college And at that time, I had read in the newspaper that they were having auditions for an Orange Bowl Queen or Orange Bowl contest that we had in those days for the grand celebration at New
The
Year's.
King Orange Bowl. Yeah, the
King
Orange
Orange
Bowl
Bowl.
game.
Yes, here in Miami. And I handed her an application that I had gotten for her, and the
Drove me to the Orange Bowl
but
Stadium.
before that day,
It was that
day
day.
came up, and that Friday, and they said, I read the newspaper that at 5 o'clock is the deadline. So she comes home from school at 3, and I said, June, did you fill out the application? And she said, no, Mom,
I want to be.
I'm not going to win anything. No. I said, get that application now. Get in the car. I'm driving. You fill that out. And we filled it out. The time.
But tell her we're in the office and it says minimum height is 5'5". I said, Mom, I'm 5'4". Shh. No, Mom. Shh. There's a woman sitting at the desk across from me.
And she did.
And I did.
And she won. She was the Orange.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
She was the Orange Bowl Queen for that particular year, and that was so beautiful. She was so.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, a reporter called me from the Miami Herald. This is a true story, and said, "I've just been crowned. Everyone's celebrating." And he said, "Hi, I'm so and so from the Miami Herald. How tall are you?" And I said,
5'5".
I'm 5'5" on the phone, and he said, "You don't look 5'5". And I said, "That's because the other girls are really tall."
Wow.
Okay. And I thought he was going to come over and measure me. But then the headline of his title was The Diminutive Orange Bowl Queen.
Diminutive.
So he didn't believe me. That was his way of getting back.
But tell Jackie what the question was that got you.
No.
Okay. Oh, the question. Oh, you can email it to me. Maybe I can put it in my show notes.
Yeah.
And the third and final point I'd like to make is when now you were in college, and then you got out of college and you were making applications for different jobs in the broadcast industry. And CNN was a nascent organization, is just starting up. We're talking about the
1983.
And June.
I got an opportunity to go straight to CNN headline news when it was the headline brand new. And so they flew me out to Atlanta. I met with Paul Amos, the vice president, and he said that I would be working 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, repeating the news every 20 minutes. And I said, will I ever get to report on any stories? No, you are a presenter. You'll be a talking head. And I thought, I just graduated from Northwestern. I wanted to be a reporter. Sure. And so you wanted me to go to CNN. But I said no.
Opportunity,
I said no. I have no idea. I want to stay in broadcasting, and so I went against her advice. And if I had a crystal ball, I was then turned into and realized that was not the right decision. But we all make decisions in life.
If you had listened to your mother,
are right at the time based on the information that we know.
Absolutely. And it's also, we all have to make choices of our own, and whether the repercussions or what we have to go experience that.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to our career. And I always say sometimes you have to go sideways. It's not always a straight trajectory. Wow, this is really amazing. I'm so enjoying this, and we still have a bunch of time left. Dorothy, describe your mom a little bit to us.
My mother was also a person that inspired me to go on in life, to do things. We lived in New York State, as I say, and I remember her telling me, Dorothy, I think you have a better future than staying here in New York State. It's not New York City, but upstate New York. She said, I encourage you to expand your boundaries, expand your horizons. And I listened to her, and I'm so glad I did. And she didn't have the worldly experience. I mean, we're talking about, she was born in 1902. So you know what era she's from.
It was a Swedish family too.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a little Swedish enclave up there, wasn't it? Like lots of Swedes.
Yes, up there in Austin, New York.
It was my great-grandmother, your grandmother, who came over from Sweden.
My grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side both came over from Sweden. My mother was first first generation from Sweden, whereas my father's side was from New England, and they were there since the Revolutionary War, and that's why I'm a DAR today, the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Revolution.
Yeah. So when it was my mother who encouraged me, and I was a young girl, and the boyfriend I was with at the time was, as I look back, I'm so glad I didn't become serious with this young man or marry him, because my mother said, if they make you cry before you marry, what's going to happen afterwards? I always remembered her telling me that.
Wow.
And with that, she's encouraged me to expand my horizons. And I said, well, I'm going to go to Florida, because I've heard that's a beautiful place to look at and see. And she said, I'll go with you. She could not drive, never did know how to drive, but she and I took off and left my father at home working. And she and I drove down when there were no interstates even yet. I mean, it took us days and days to drive, but we drove down, and I fell in love with Miami. I thought this is the most beautiful place, and I still feel it's the most beautiful place in the world. And Coral Gables itself is magnificent. It's one of a kind. The home of the University of Miami, and all kinds of beautiful enclaves here and so forth and so on. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would ever achieve what I did achieve. And I'm very proud to say I achieved that. As we said at the outset, the only female mayor in the city's 100 years history, which is something to be proud of. And
I'll add one more thing to that, she achieved all of that. She was a very an activist, a civic activist, from the get-go. She's always in a good way.
Yeah.
No, in a good way. So that led to her political career. She did this without ever going to college, and she always felt bad about that.
That's true.
That she didn't have a college degree, right? Because she couldn't afford to go to college. That's why her mother said, "You can't go to college, but
get married."
Get married.
In a way, MRS degree, right? They call it the MRS degree.
So when did you graduate from the University of Miami?
1976.
The old one of the graduates of the University of Miami. At age what?
Well,
she was in her 70s. She's 92 now.
I'm going to be 92.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes,
Oh, congratulations.
Everything fell into place. And I've got to say, I know this is Women's History Month, but I got to say that my husband, who I told you at the outset, passed away just 2 years ago. We were married of 70 years, was the one who always encouraged me, just like my mother had before. He encouraged me to do this and that. He said
to run for office,
to join organizations, a women's club at the outset, which really gave me a stepping stone into dealing with other women, because I didn't have my college. I wasn't in a sorority, or it wasn't in college classes. It gave me the opportunity. I look back, everything fell into place, Jackie. It fell into place that I could never. I've been told that I have a Swedish godmother that has been circling my head all these years. I
believe it.
I've come to believe it.
Wow, that's fantastic. So do you have children, June?
I do. I have 2 daughters, and they are, one of my daughters lives in Los Angeles. She's actually an entertainment attorney out there in LA. She's 34. She's doing very, very well. And then I have a daughter named Darby, who has followed in my footsteps, and she's in broadcasting. She's out in Salt Lake City right now.
Well, you started.
That's where I started. And she's working on a documentary. And I'll say that my mother and my father both, but always tried to instill confidence in me and to be bold. And she just gave you some great examples. But for some reason, I grew up feeling very unsure of myself, and my success in my career came very, very quickly. I was in Los Angeles with KNBC by the time I was 27, and I was doing reports for NBC News. And so it all happened so fast. And of course, back then, the newsrooms weren't as nice as they are today. And so there was a lot of backstabbing, a lot of things. And I had imposter syndrome. And so with my own daughters, I've tried very hard to instill confidence in them, just like my parents have. And I have found the same story has repeated itself, because even though they're successful, I'm constantly hearing from them that they're unsure of themselves. The same kind of questions I have.
Oh, I know. It's
like, you can't teach confidence. There's a lot you can do to help a child have confidence, but moving out into the world it's really through experience that confidence is gained, a true confidence, you know?
It's so hard to understand. I think so many of us as moms, female role models, we try and instill that whoever we are able to be in the company of, correct, right? Anyone we're able to touch. And yet, my mom was the same thing. She was sending my voiceover demo to WABC radio in New York City with my head shot. I wound up working there, not in response to her doing that, but I worked there for 20 years as the female voice of maybe 5 radio stations and the female production director. And yet, we always have our doubts, especially in the talent industry, but any industry. So the message to our kids is listen to your mother.
Yes, but they won't. But they won't.
I don't know what I guess you just have to support them, right? You just support them.
You do.
And sometimes you nudge them, but you have to be optimistic. And those one-on-one conversations are very important to have. It's not always what's right in front of you, but it's a bigger, broader picture maybe that you want to instill in them. Not your life story matters versus where you are today, but we just can't stop trying to encourage them.
And I believe it's all there. It is worth doing because they are listening, even when they say they're not listening, and even when they do the opposite of what you've just said. It's there in them. And I've seen that happen with my daughters. Now as my older daughter's 34 and my younger daughter's now 30. I have 2 daughters in their 30s now. And I start hearing they'll say things will come out and I go, they have listened. And the confidence is there. They wouldn't be achieving what they're achieving if they did not have confidence. So yes, keep going because I still, I was never a rebellious child. She modeled boldness and what is it? Having confidence in yourself, but getting out there and ambition. That's the word I was looking for. She modeled ambition for me. Yeah. And even though I lack confidence, then wouldn't we all like to go back and start our careers like I'm number one and I'm fantastic,
Yeah, but there's issues with that too, right?
But it's there that my parents have always believed in me. And I always knew too, no matter where I was, I would call them if I needed a boost.
Yeah.
Always be there for me.
Well, Jackie, it's almost like taking a seed, and planting it in soil, and you tender it and so forth, and you hope that it's going to come up. Some don't, they just die within the soil, and others flourish. And I think you're an analogy there.
You nurture your little babies.
Right. Let them fly away and live on their own and figure it out on their own too. A lot of things, if we all listen to our parents by this generation, we'd be perfect. But every generation needs to find out and learn things on its own and take it hopefully to the next level.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about the play that's coming up. This is your debut as a playwright.
It is. So I've always been a visual thinker because of my years in television. And I had listened to my grandmother's story, Lucy Mae's story. When she left Indiana, she quickly left the Mae behind too and became Lucy. But anyway, Mae is her middle name, M-A-E. And but I listened to her tell her story, and I always thought, gosh, that's an amazing story. And I carried it with me. And then it was during the pandemic that I had some time to finally sit down, and I did a lot of research. I read every book, it seems, about early Miami history, and I found out a lot about Carl Fisher, who developed Miami Beach, and then George Merrick, who founded Coral Gables, our city here, the city beautiful, like a utopian city back then, and fascinating stories. And I was able to put it together. I actually wrote a screenplay first because I wanted to include all of the Miami story, the black and white story. But then the city was coming up with its centennial celebration. And I decided to take a bite out of the screenplay and put more about George Merrick into it and gift it to the city as my gift for its centennial celebration. So it's going to be April 29th. Through May 3rd. It's a short run at Miracle Theater on Miracle Mile Historic Theater. And it's a one-act, 80-minute program. That's fun. It's a fun romp through the roaring 20s because down
Yeah,
you know that this was the naughtiest place in the country back then. Nobody really knows it. You see all these like, I don't know, Boardwalk Empire and these stories about the 20s and you think, oh, Atlantic City or Chicago, New York, those are the places where the Roaring 20s happened. It happened on steroids down here because Prohibition was not taken very seriously. We had all this coastline, unprotected coastline, and the booze was pouring in from the Bahamas
sure.
and from Cuba, and it was being served openly in the restaurants. And my grandmother is among those who came down, cut her hair short, and wore lipstick. And women were bold and in public, then smoking and kissing in public and things like that. There was no social hierarchy down here.
No.
You know, it was a brand new population. Everybody was new, so no one had a hold on society like they had experienced back home. So it was
How refreshing. It's so very refreshing to, but then of course the depression followed shortly after that and everyone had to deal with it.
It was so fast and blink of an eye because they had the Great Florida Land Boom in 1925, and that occurred because in 1924 the state legislature got rid of income tax and what inheritance taxes
Oh, yeah.
done to lure the wealthy down. And it worked. 2.5 million people moved into Florida in 1925 alone. And you didn't have to have a license to sell real estate. And so they had they called them Binta boys.
Yeah.
These boys, kids really from New York and New Jersey who had these big binders and they would sell the same property 6 to 10 times over in a week.
Yes.
Because there was a backlog at the courthouse.
They called them Binder boys.
Binda boys, because that's how they pronounced it. So, but that lasted all of a year. And in 1926, it fell apart, kind of like the tulip craze in the Netherlands, when the tulip prices went so high until finally something cracked. And that happened in Florida. And then they had a hurricane in September of 1926, which basically leveled Miami, and everyone had to start over again. So my grandmother came down just in time for all of that. And then
In that 1 year.
in that
actually.
1 year,
Amazing.
Wow.
What you have done is something no one else has done. June has taken George Merrick, our founding father of Coral Gables, and made a story, a fictional story, a love story, if you will, about him that has not occurred anywhere else to anyone's understanding or knowledge. Everything has been factual, historical, historically correct.
nonfiction books,
Nonfiction. But this is the first
academic works, which I've relied on for my research. But this is the first time that anyone's taken the story of early Miami live on stage, where you get to hear and every time I saw a direct quote, I wrote it down and I try to weave it into the dialogue as much as possible. But I made it fun. It's a fun,
And
fun
tell about
story.
the opening night. That's going to be a beautiful night, a very different one. The other one, then the following one, another regular type.
Opening night, people are going to come dressed in the 1920s.
Yes, I read that. That's fantastic. That's great.
VIP cocktail party and then a dinner afterwards. So,
But where's the dinner going to be held?
well, that's in question at the moment, Mom. Because it wasn't
Stay
gonna-
tuned.
Stay tuned for that. But anyway,
Well, congratulations.
I know you have the information on tickets in case any one of your listeners are in Miami and want to come join us.
Sure. And your followers as well, because this will be posted everywhere. So they'll be able to get the information.
In addition to the Centennial happenings, they're having a park named in my honor. And I'll take very, very briefly about this one if you want to know. And that is going to be an unveiling of the park. And that's a first also in a couple of ways, because ordinarily all the parks in Coral Gables are named after someone who's deceased. I'm not deceased.
No,
They got tired of waiting.
And so they've done that in my honor. But in my honor, it's going to be the first theme park, I call it, in Coral Gables, in that the theme is going to be the Wizard of Oz. What is my name? Dorothy.
Dorothy.
Am I from? New York State, Peekskill, New York, where the author of The Wizard of Oz, F. Frank Baum, B-A-U-M, that was the author, he went to Peekskill Military Academy, where I lived and grew up. So because of all these things together, we're going to have a park.
He said, he got off the boat, because that's how they got
Oh,
there in those days, 1800s. He says, "Where's the Peekskill Military Academy?"
Yes.
And the man said, "Just follow the yellow brick road."
Because
And the yellow bricks are still there today.
the yellow brick's still there.
Wow, this is fantastic. I've never heard this story before.
Up there in New York State and that Hudson Valley area is a lot of
Dutch.
The Dutch settled
Dutch
there.
yellow, Dutch yellow
And
bricks.
it's all the yellow brick, the yellow soil up there all over the place. So it's all come together. And
This is wonderful. Congratulations. Oh, absolutely fantastic. Dorothy Thomson and June Thomson Morris. Thank you so, so much. I love having you two here, seeing the dynamics between the two of you. It's absolutely wonderful. And maybe I can come down and visit your park anytime soon. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother. Have a great day.